So I'm Lorella Paleni, and I'm originally from Italy. I went to school in Italy for my undergrad in Venice, and then I did my master program in US, New York City. Lived a very brief time in Berlin, and now I'm currently based in Paris, where I've been for the past 5 years. And I mostly work with painting. I do also some animations. They're not visible on HLab because I cannot post videos on it. So I actually do work with some hand-painted animation, which is kind for me a continuity of my painting work. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of like the essential parts.
How do you think your environment influences your work? So you can talk as little or as long as you want with as many cities as you want, but it sounds like you've been around a bunch of different places. But maybe you can touch on, if different places have influenced your work in different ways.
So when I started to move around a little bit, I did think it would actually influence my work more. I think it's not as evident as people may think. I do like to think of my work as something that progress from work to work, like kind of like each work it's connected to the previous ones and is connected to the next one. And I think whatever I'm going through in my life experience, which can be like living in a different cities or meeting new people, are kind of experience that layer on top of each other, kind of like I do with the paintings. So it's more of like I build up of knowledge that it can shape my view on certain subjects, but it's not. I don't think it's immediately translated into the visual. It's more of like it's more of like a like a overlapping of like experiences that like give shape to who I am and eventually will in a way or the other like get into the work. But it's not something, I mean, I do have to say, yes, New York definitely like was a big change for me because of like what you got the chance to see in New York and like the type of fit, like coming from Italy and from Venice. It was very different environment, and it was like a different time in my life, so it did open up my view quite a bit. But I don't, yeah, I don't think like the work shaped in a conscious way. It was more of like a progression that like, yeah, translated kind of unconsciously, I think.
Mm-hmm. When you were in undergrad in Venice, can you tell us a little bit about the type of approach to art education there was
Oh,
there?
compared to the US, for example?
Yeah.
Uh, it's different. It was quite different. I don't know like how things are evolved right now because it's been a while. It's been a while since my BFA, but I know art academy in Italy in general are kind of pretty old institutions. For a while, they were not even considered as universities. When I did go to like to the academy, they had already like do the step of being recognized as official like universities, but it was still quite recent, so like there was still this type of feeling that they were not quite as serious as any like other like literature or like that the visual arts were kind of this like blurred space. And the way we had it, it was like more atelier based, like it was like big atelier where like shared studios. We will have, at my particular school, we had 5 different painting professors, and you had to choose one. So you will work under the umbrella of their atelier. So kind of a little bit like old style, I think, in terms of compare. There was much less critical analysis of the work compared to what I experienced then in the American environment. There was not much, there was a little bit of discussion, but not as much as there was as I experienced in US. So the approach is very like, and depending also on the academy can really change, because I had friends that went to different academies, and I know certain are very, very classical, like still life paintings, like old master's copy. It wasn't the case for me. I was lucky enough to be in an atelier that had a good balance of classical and also like contemporary approach, which I think was helpful. But in terms of approach to the work, there was not the same amount of critical thinking that I then encountered in like art universities in US.
For me, I see a very distinct aesthetic, but do you feel like you established this aesthetic while you were in undergrad, or did that come later?
I think it did come later. I think there were certain things that there were some seeds that I can recognize, that like some like motifs that come back, some motifs that are like important to me, and that they started kind of bubbling up on the surface at the time that I was in undergrad, but they were not still ripe. They were like these signs of like some interests I was having, and like I wasn't completely aware yet why, and some others I think I was afraid of approaching them. So I don't think I really like started understanding more like my work more like that. I started understanding it better later, definitely after undergrad. I think undergrad is like, it's really a transitional moment. You're like living out your teenage years. You are like in the transition of like becoming an adult. There is so much going on in your mind, and I think that if I look back at my work in undergrad, I was testing out things. I'm always testing out things. I think it's something I like in general about art, is the idea that it can be like this place to test things out, to play, to make mistakes, to not be precious. We are not chirurgeons. We are not like operating on humans' body. We don't risk to kill anybody, which I think it's like the beauty of it. We can play with images. We can play with colors. As Emiliano was saying, I do like, he loves poetry. I do love poetry. I think painting as much as like poems in a certain sense. Like I see like paintings much closer to like the words of poem than the words of like something more analytical and more like, poems are words with that have colors, that have sound, and I, when I think of painting, I think of that. So sorry, I got a little bit lost from your original
Okay.
question, I think.
No, I appreciate the answer. What role do animals play in the imagery of your works, and has that changed over time?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. This actually I can connect to the previous question you asked me about my undergrad works, for example, where I had started using animals, and at the time they were more of accessory like elements. I started playing with the image of animals, but I wasn't really like investigating it. I wasn't really like giving like the full attention. And as I better understood, like I think also myself and like what I was interested in, like animals became this this subject that allowed me really like to, I had an interest in the subject per se, because I've been fond to it since I was like little. So like sort of like love and like curiosity, and with time I developed also this consciousness that they were necessary like presence for me, that I needed these creators in my life, and that they did make whatever life I was living like richer, and that I could discover something different and new from them. So like I think the work as it developed, I started like the animals started taking more of like a stronger like main character um, aspect in the paintings. From the accessory one, when I like my very early works, when the animals were kind of like around but not really like main subjects, and at the certain moment, I think I'd really realized that it was they did I needed them to be the main character in the stories of certain paintings, and that's what happened. I think that they did become like the subject of sometimes almost portraits of them, sometimes situations, but they did take this more important role uh, for me in like my image making, in my narrative about the work.
What I really like about your pieces is it's showing you're showing so many different sides of animals, not just, you know, you have some really great pieces like this piece, you know, a person with an animal holding it like that. That shows an interesting relationship, human animal relationship. It looks like a dog, but also I like stuff like this. There's so much variety in how you're portraying the animal. It's kind of like we're seeing all these different sides of the animal. It looks like sometimes they're in a natural, engaging naturally in a natural environment, sometimes engaging with the human, and sometimes, you know, more as like a portrait, the identity of the animal, like that cat one we just saw.
Yeah.
So can you tell us this particular piece? How did you arrive at this particular imagery? Does the paint application help tell the story of what's going on in the image? If you
Yeah.
want to talk about the process of this piece, that'd be great.
Uh, so actually, like in terms of subject, so I what you said about trying to represent them and see them in different environments, and more like kind of trying to show different facets of the animals. Yes, that's definitely like something voluntary, like I do, and that's um that was my will to like kind of also to show them as subjects, and as subjects as someone more complex that has not just one side of things. This specific painting, I did actually a few paintings which a similar theme. In this case, they are wild dogs. That's what I used as like original image. I was really fascinated by this idea of the pack, pack of wolf, pack of wild dogs. It kind of started from like this analysis of relationship, and also like of movement and bodies, and even playing. Like for a while I was really interested in the subject of the play fight. I found out it was actually like a whole book written about like kind of about play fight, and how that can be political, and how that connects. So I thought it was like it was something I was very fascinated to. And in this particular piece, where like the imagery, I think it did become quite abstract at a certain point. Uh, but I was really interested in the dynamic of what was happening. So like the event happening like of these wild dogs, and like how like their body were interacting with whatever they were dealing with. And in terms of painting like treatment, I do work a lot in layers, so, in particular for the big pieces. Small pieces, sometimes I have some small pieces where I go on a more like direct one seat kind of work, but the majority of the larger pieces I do work in a lot of layers, and I do build up kind of like, that's also like why I resonated with Emiliano's work. Like I kind of overlay with time and like different, like kind of building up the image without having a very precise plan. So in this case, it was kind of the case, although it's a work that actually did came quite easily compared to others. Like it wasn't very painful. Like some works are literally like painful to finish and some others just come very naturally, and I think this was one of those where somehow like the paint and the way that I was representing like the animals just started to make sense naturally, and I didn't have to force it too much. And Dwellers is actually a title I used several times for several paintings. Some are with animals, some are with humans. So I have a few paintings that are titled Dwellers where there are actually human figure in it and not animals. And that's on purpose. I like this idea of the dwellers of this, like as because at the end of the day we too are animals. So I like this. I like to remind myself that, and to be like, don't forget.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between how you utilize abstraction, realism, and expressive mark making? So like there's the grass would be more expressive mark making. And even in the cat, I mean, I just think I'm really drawn. I mean, if you just take this area of the cat, it's a really beautiful piece of abstraction, but it does belong within the object you're painting. But I feel like your work is, you're taking that into consideration. So it's like an abstract aspect, abstract design within the realm of, I'm painting or realism. But I'm okay. This question isn't going very well. I mean, I think you're going to answer it well, but I'm just not really making it very clear.
No. It's I think I understand what you mean. I think like you're busy, like you're talking. I mean, yes, it's
I'll just say there's so many from what I see, there's so many choices you're making that make it such an amazing piece. Like when to use the expressive, when to use the abstraction, when to use the realism. So take us through maybe how you make those decisions if you're comfortable with that.
So actually, like that's something that I've been kind of I think a lot of painters, I mean, I'm surely not the only one. You yourself, Daniel, I think you kind of deal with that in your own work, where you try to I come from a very figurative tradition, simply because of my background, because of how the art I grew up with. I did, as a younger woman and artist, look a lot at very figurative art, and I started to develop a different conscience with time, also thanks to certain artists, even like classical artists like Rembrandt, where the paint start to really take another meaning, and it start not just depicting something but also expressing something by itself. And I think that's also where there's been a moment where I realized that realism per se was not something that really interested me. I wasn't interested in describing. I was more interested in giving a sensation and transmitting something that was not, that I could not just describe by words. And if I was literally reproducing something, 100% like as it was, I would somehow give up on something else, which was like another dimension, more like a poetry like dimension, if we have to. So I think the balance for me is that there is something I want to say, but there is also something I want to give. And in order for me to do that, I found that I need to always kind of be tight-roping between like the subject being there, because I am a subject painter. Like I do work with subjects, but I also need a certain like expressivity of the work in terms of like colors and paint and even like definitely like how you paint. It's never just like what subject you choose, it's also like how you choose to represent it, which makes it's definitely that like you can paint the same flower, you can have it painted by like hundreds of painters, and like each one of them is gonna like interpret it in a different way, and that's what makes it rich. So I think it's this in my work, I always kind of like struggling and trying to find a ground with the painting, where I also like there is a big role played in my work by that is played by mistakes, by chance, by letting things happen and see what happens, and if I can profit of the accident that's gonna happen on thanks to the paint, to make something else, and also like to maybe surprise myself. So there is definitely like a strong element of play, of wanting also like to surprise myself in the process. Yeah, I think, yeah. And of course, a desire also like to break. I mean, we are a generation that grew up with recorded images, photography, like we screen images, everything. So like, I think the risk sometimes is like that these images become so like present that they never leave you. And I wanted to like, I didn't want that to happen in my work. I wanted my work to break from that, and like being able like to build itself also in a more organic way. And that's where like for me it's important that the paint has like the paint, like literally like the material of paint has a part of its own in a certain way, that where I don't control it like 100%.
Awesome. Do you want to say anything final about like the next group of works that you want to do, or you're looking at doing some new ideas?
I don't really work compartmentalized usually in my work. So like, it's not like I decide like I'm gonna stop this series of work and I'm gonna start a new one. It's usually more like they kind of sometimes I go back on works I was like on subject that I worked like years before, and like, so it's hard for me to say like this chapter is closed. I prefer like to put together the chapters after I have been working on them. So what I've been working on. So yeah, no, I'm definitely still, I plan to keep working on the subject of the animals for a while. I think it's a subject that's gonna stay with me for a long time. Woman, it's like another big subject for me. So like portraits, or like female subject in particular, but not just, but like a lot. So I will be lying if I will say that I'm not mainly focused on them. And as you said before, like the relationship of humans and animals, that's actually like that relationship also of the two. That's still something I plan on keeping working. So I'm kind of still working on like similar subject and just kind of looking how they are gonna develop in terms of images, and maybe in terms also of how I think of them and what they mean to me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.